minions might look cute, but make no mistake, if they were put on trial at The Hague for their millennia of offenses, the sentence would be absolutely jaw-dropping. Let's open up the criminal records of the most well-known names among Gru's henchmen and look at their respective sentences, if they actually had to pay for their crimes. Let's kick off our list with him, Bob. He might be the cutest of the yellow beings, carrying around a teddy bear and rocking 2 different colored eyes. But Bob committed one of the most audacious crimes in British history. By pulling the mythical sword Excalibur from the stone, Bob literally forced Queen Elizabeth II to abdicate the throne, taking control of the entire United Kingdom. The act Bob committed involves overthrowing a constitutional monarchy through non-democratic means, and that is exactly the ultimate crime of a coup d'etat and high treason. Just to give you an idea of the severity, in ancient England this was punishable by the guillotine, but nowadays, the lovable and cute Bob would get the maximum penalty. Bob's total sentence would be life in prison, or 50 years in a maximum security penitentiary. If the little minion were arrested, that would be the absolute last thing he'd do in his life. Now let's talk about the first crime committed by a minion in the history of planet Earth. To do this, we're going to start by pulling up the rap sheet from ancient times, where Norbert is our main defendant. If you aren't putting a face to the name of this minion, don't worry, you'll remember him in just a second. In prehistoric times, he and his gang were accomplices in the destruction of an endangered species that was likely the last of its kind. This happened when he, while grabbing a banana from under a rock, ended up causing a landslide and guided a T-Rex straight into the crater of an active volcano. As if that weren't enough, he slipped and stopped right at the edge of the cliff where the T-Rex was balancing, and by hitting his head on the rock, he ended up causing the poor creature's fall into the volcano, thus making him responsible for the extinction of a native species. That is a very serious environmental crime, earning him 10 years in prison. But Norbert's crime spree doesn't stop there. Over in Transylvania, he was the one who accidentally opened the castle curtains and unalived Count Dracula with sunlight on his 357th birthday. So, for involuntary manslaughter, when there is no intent to kill, but there is gross negligence, he would get another 10 years. Norbert's total sentence would be 20 years in prison. Now, let's talk about the leader of the main trio from the first Minions movie, Kevin. He has a pretty extensive rap sheet. During the Napoleonic Wars, Kevin and his brothers fired a heavy artillery cannon at their own leader, Napoleon Bonaparte. Making an attempt on the life of a head of state and military commander is a crime of high treason and attempted murder, which right off the bat earns him 30 years in the French dungeons. Centuries later, under the command of Scarlet Overkill, Kevin orchestrates the invasion of the Tower of London, a fortified World Heritage Site, using smuggled weapons from the Nelson family of robbers. Trespassing on royal property and criminal conspiracy. For this attack on the British Crown, the justice system would easily tack on another 20 years to his sentence. Kevin's total sentence would be 50 years in prison. You might not know this, but Otto, that chatty minion with braces on his teeth who we met in Minions, The Rise of Gru, committed financial and traffic crimes. First, he took the powerful Zodiac Stone, an artifact stolen by the Vicious Six, and traded it for a pet rock with googly eyes. Doing business with stolen and magical items is receiving stolen property and misappropriation, which would easily get him 5 years in prison. Then he crossed the entire United States riding a children's tricycle on federal highways with no license plate, no registration, and no driver's license, causing a severe risk of accidents. If he were caught, the Highway Patrol would show no mercy and slap him with the maximum fine of $150,000. Otto's total sentence would be 5 years in prison plus $150,000 in traffic violations. Continuing our list, the third one-eyed minion from the first movie isn't far behind. During the Great Heist in London, Stewart used an illegal invention to hypnotize and mind control the British Royal Guards. Subjecting law enforcement officers to mind control to force them to dance and abandon their posts is sabotage, obstruction of justice, and severe psychological harm, which would land him 15 years in the slammer. To make matters worse, after the final battle against Scarlet Overkill, Stewart receives a super guitar from Queen Elizabeth, but immediately afterward, he smashes it. The detail here is that if that was a museum piece, the act becomes destruction of public and historical property, which would yield another 5 years in prison, plus a fine for the value of the item. Stewart's total sentence would be 20 years in prison and a gigantic fine. You might remember that Mel was the absolute leader of the Minions' strike in Despicable Me 3. After leading the mutiny against Gru, his first crime was breaking into the Hollywood studio of a talent show singing in another language, which constitutes trespassing on private property, which would result in 3 years in prison. But the worst happened when they were arrested. Mel led a widespread takeover inside a maximum security penitentiary, controlling other gangs and taking over the prison yard, followed by a mass breakout using a plane built out of laundry trash. Forming a prison cartel and aggravated escape carry a heavy 25 years under American law. Mel's total sentence would be 28 years in federal prison. Dave is loved by the fans, but he has a sick compulsion for heavy weaponry. In the first movie, out of sheer jealousy of Gru, Dave pulls a rocket launcher out of nowhere and fires it at his own colleagues who were in a peaceful meeting with the famous yell, "Rocket launcher!" That is attempted multiple homicide and illegal possession of a weapon of mass destruction. For that alone, it would be 30 years in the clink. The situation gets worse in the fourth movie when Dave becomes a mega minion with super strength. He tries to catch a backpack thief, but in doing so, he ends up hitting the victim's own head with a piece of an iron bar shaped like a boomerang. This perfectly qualifies as aggravated bodily harm, compounded by reckless vigilantism and excessive use of force in the defense of a third party. For this bump in the road and totally disproportionate use of force, the court would easily add another 8 years in prison to his record, besides forcing him to pay a hefty settlement to cover the medical bills and emotional distress of the poor, unconscious guy. Dave's total sentence would be 30 years in prison and a settlement of a few $1,000s. Now seriously, after all these details and Easter eggs, I think we deserve your subscription, don't we? Let's talk now about Phil, the protagonist of the game Minions Paradise. In the story, Gru decided to give the Minions a well-deserved vacation on a giant luxury cruise ship. And what did Phil do? Being totally clumsy, he accidentally sank the entire ship in the middle of the ocean, leaving hundreds of crew members shipwrecked on a desert island. Causing the sinking of a large vessel, putting the lives of hundreds of passengers at direct risk, is classified as the crime of involuntary shipwreck and exposure to imminent danger to life. Just for sinking a luxury ocean liner, the maritime judge would hand down a severe 15 years behind bars, plus 10 years for extreme negligence. Phil's total sentence would be 25 years in prison. Now let's talk about Jorge, that short, chubby minion we met in the first Despicable Me. While Gru was planning the greatest heist of the century, what was Jorge doing? He was sitting on the laboratory photocopier, making copies of his own buttocks and laughing with his friends. In the real corporate world, this is a very serious offense. The misuse of confidential company machinery combined with indecent exposure constitutes indecent assault in the workplace and damage to corporate property. Besides an immediate firing for just cause, he'd get 3 years for the indecent assault and another 2 years for the intentional waste of resources. Jorge's total sentence would be 5 years in prison and one heck of a labor lawsuit. Mark is the minion famous for loving to sing, but his biggest crime happened in the first movie when he, Tim, and Phil had to go to the mall to buy a unicorn toy for Agnes. In order to not get caught, Mark disguised himself wearing women's clothing to pass as the mom of the family. Forging an identity to conduct commercial transactions and deceive civilians is the classic crime of false representation and identity fraud. To make matters worse, inside the store, they destroyed the shelves and caused a widespread panic. For this disastrous trespassing and destruction of private property, he'd receive 5 years for the fraud and another 5 for the vandalism. Mark's total sentence would be 10 years in prison. And since we're talking about the mall, we can't forget about Tim. He was the tallest minion in the trio and took on the role of the dad of the disguised family. Just like Mark, he'd be indicted for false representation, meaning 5 years in prison as well. But Tim's case gets worse in the fourth movie of the franchise, where he gains superpowers and becomes a mega minion capable of stretching his own body. With total irresponsibility, he uses his ability in the middle of the city, stretching himself for blocks, stopping a train from derailing. But right after that, he throws the train into a building, destroying both of them. This constitutes disturbing the public peace, damage to urban infrastructure, and risk of mass disaster, adding another 15 years to his rap sheet. Tim's total sentence would be 20 years in the slammer. Jerry doesn't escape the weight of the law either. In the first movie, he was Stewart's accomplice and played irresponsibly with rockets in the lab. But, just like Tim, his true crimes came when he turned into a Mega Minion and gained an indestructible, rock-like body. Jerry literally devoured a bomb and then let out a super burp that even managed to flip over a police car. Large-scale destruction of public property and indestructible vandalism. The district attorney's office wouldn't have the patience to deal with a defendant made of stone and would demand a heavy sentence to keep him away from society, likely applying a 30-year sentence in a maximum security prison. To wrap things up, we have Gus, the cone-headed minion who gained the power of flight in Despicable Me. 4, when he was patrolling the skies and came across a window washer hanging by a broken rope, desperate for help at the top of a skyscraper, Gus simply cleaned the glass for the man, gave a smile, and flew away, leaving the poor guy hanging to his own fate. Ignoring a person in a situation of imminent danger when you have the full capacity to help without personal risk is aggravated failure to render aid in criminal negligence. For these crimes, the court would easily hand the Mega Minion 5 years behind bars. Adding to this abandonment, we also have his extremely serious offenses against civil aviation, since he doesn't have authorization to fly over the city, earning him another 20 years. Gus's total sentence would be 25 years in prison under federal jurisdiction. We'll wrap up here, but if you also love everything involving pop culture, check out these 2 video options we're leaving for you on your screen. You can watch either of the 2, you're sure to love them.